Alright my friends, it's been a while, and it's about attempt number 3 at recording this video, but we're back. We're back with Early Age Ulm in that new patch smell, relatively soon after we last left off in that video, which was months and months and months ago. This series sort of went on the back burner for a while, but I'm bringing it back because I really want to push this game through to conclusion, because it was a different style of narration, it was a different style of nation, and it was a game which I think had a lot of lessons to teach. So we're back. What I'm going to do this episode, because we're coming back in at turn 37, when the last video, which was I think turn 34, was so long ago, is provide a quick recap of the game to date, a minute or two. Then outline the situation, what has happened between this video and the previous video I recorded, and what my thinking was at this point of the game. So, in this new patch smell, I was playing Early Age Ulm, who are I would say a fairly limited, but a human nation with a few tricks that they can leverage. Playing in the early age, obviously, on a relatively large map. Some of the defining features I had in this game were the fact that I neighboured a Therados in the water, that I had a strong Helheim to my south who had rapidly eaten Makoni, who used to be my southern neighbour. And then in the northeast, I had originally gone to war with Sarmatia in order to prevent them being eaten by Hinnom. But they performed better than I expected against Therados, and I was able to convince Therados to accept a ceasefire, and thus myself accepted a ceasefire with Sarmatia because frankly it wasn't going too well. They got their tack out early. My early war was pretty bad, and then to make matters worse, after we had already agreed a peace, a misclick caused me to get an entire army destroyed when it was meant to be like sneaking back to my lines. It stayed where it was and got completely crushed because it had no mage support. It wasn't meant to be there. So I lost a huge number of troops in the early game. So I found myself going into the turn 20s as a relatively small, relatively poor power whose strength was their troops and whose weakness was their mages, having lost a lot of my troops and watching some really major powers emerge around me. What happened then was a series of diplomatic dances as I tried to balance Therados and Helheim against each other and come into that war in a way that would give me a chance to survive. So what happened was I originally attacked Helheim with the assistance of Therados when Therados was the weaker power, and during that offensive was able to push south and take the real prize for me, which was Makoni itself, which now accounts for more than 10% of my economy, even now, and a significant share of my gems, as well as a number of valuable provinces around it. That offensive also got me contact through here, which originally allowed me to contact Hinnom. I then essentially changed sides. Hinnom offered me a ceasefire. Therados didn't bargain with me to keep it. In fact, Therados said fair play. So I then engaged in a limited offensive against Therados before settling into a sort of a cold war with the occasional province trade, while Helheim continued the war. Originally very, very successfully, but Therados is definitely punching heavily, as you'd expect a large Therados, so Therados stretches from here to here, to do. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get a picture at this point in the game of what Pangaea and the other major powers are doing off to my west. I know that some of the powers over there have fallen or are in the process of falling, and that's sort of critical to my decision making at this point. What I had been doing strategically when we last left is I had made the decision to move in on Hinnom, who is dying to the Vanir of Vanheim, and we're in a terrible, terrible way. And as a result, I snagged these two land provinces here, actually 3 land provinces here, over the course of a rapid offensive, and I took a number of water provinces, some of which have turned out to be extremely valuable. I have achieved that, for the record, through use of a small underwater undead contingent, but most of the work here is being done by this guy. Really basic budget, 25 prot iron skin thug with a water breathing ring, a vine shield, and a frostbrand. He's not actually a budget thug because he's got a vine shield, and vine shields are expensive, even with hammers, because you can't get your master smiths to forge them, which is unfortunate. So he's not truly budget, but he's much more reliable versus underwater PD like Shark Tribe that otherwise have 3 attacks. I brought the undead to soak up things like Shark Tribe, also Shark Knights if I encountered them, and that's proven to be very effective. Undead aren't really good against Shark Tribe underwater, but you get there. You'll see the Frostbrand, however, did a significant share of that damage. So in 37, what are the major developments? Well, I've set my line in the south, I've moved into Hinnom, and a couple of other things happened. The first where we got confirmation that Tianqi has been vanquished. Tianqi was one of those nations in this western region, and they have ceased to exist. That means that 3 nations essentially share this big block of territory underneath Abyssia. Calum, Varnheim, and Pangaea. And determining the exact borders of those nations was something I was working on pretty heavily diplomatically at this point. At the same time, the turn before this, Formoria fell to Abyssia. So that's not a sentence people usually get to say. But yes, Abyssia took Formoria's capital, and Formoria is reduced to a small AI rump state at this point. And we got some intelligence on this ongoing battle between the Therodians and Helheim. So the last few turns before this, there were a number of victories for the Therodians. And note that even though I'm against Therados in this war, like I'm favouring Helheim more, and he knows that, he's still perfectly willing to trade gems for each other and to let me buy a few extra items beyond my own forging. This was just to speed me up, really. I got a really good deal. He has Eternal Pyre, which is why buying fire gems is super easy. The reason I'm buying fire gems is because I'm making lightless lanterns, which is really good for me. There was a battle of significance that demonstrated that Helheim is capable of economically fighting back when Therados doesn't bring their best. So this was just a Therodian ghost blob with a small number of mages. And what you're about to encounter here is a super efficient 2-mage counter. This is a Svartalf with some boosting that is going to perform... wait a moment for it. There we go. Foul Vapors, and then retreat. This is a Varnhurst geared with a Lightning Spear for shock resistance, because Therados was using lightning magic to counter other thugs before. A Vine Shield, a Horror Helmet, Green Dragon Scale Mail, a Girdle of Might, and a Ring of Frost, which gives it shock resistant, cold resistant, poison resistant. And then its Glamour, it's misformed, it has Reinvigoration. The Bless is currently offline, which significantly reduces the power of this Bless. But it's still a significant thug. And what happens is the ghosts are completely incapable of killing this van. So what will happen here is he'll kill the Melia that is the only thing that might have killed him, will be nullified by the cold resistant 15, which nullifies the brand, which is otherwise how Therados has been cracking through Glamour. And eventually the Foul Vapors will wear everyone down, time things out, and you get this situation here, 61 casualties for Therados. Admittedly, I think 15 of them are Sacreds, one of them is a Mage, and everything else is a Ghost, which is utterly replaceable. But it shows me, at this point, that Helheim is still capable of resistance. And as long as Helheim is capable of resistance against Therados, there is no reason for me to take these very, very valuable and squishy-looking provinces up here. So instead, what I commit to at this point is a rapid crash research program, which I'm engaged in. My economy is in better shape because of this recent offensive. So this is seizing Makoni and moving into Hinnom. You can see my first war delivered me nothing. My first war got me very, very little. But this recent combination of moving on Helheim, then changing sides, and also going after Hinnom has done the job quite well, and gem income is in a similar place, really benefiting, even if the army size is sort of plateaued for the moment, because I'm still perpetually broke. And that's just because I have a lot of things to spend gold on at the moment. So at this stage, I take a wait and see. I check back, I think I'm due to check back in turn 40, after I've done some thinking, done some monitoring, seen which way the wind is blowing, and decided on the direction that I'm going to take. So we're back in turn 40. Turn 40 is the turn where I realised that we almost lost the game. And this came down to me being so focused on salvaging my situation, and almost trusting other players, I suppose, that I lost sight of major reality. So, It turns out Pangaea was huge. I knew they were big, but I did not know how big they were. Pangaea ran from the borders of our very compact Sarmatia all the way to the border with Abyssia, although this was apparently a relatively recent development. We received news this turn from Calum. Free people of the fair world, Pangaean treachery knows no bounds. Not only have they attempted ascension, but they killed our envoys and attacked us unprovoked, disrespecting our sacred pact of coexistence. They cannot be trusted. Pangaea, as of this turn, after a surprise attack on Calum, and victories against Tianchi and whatnot, controlled 5, 6, 7 of the 9 required ascension points to win the game. At this point, it was up to Calum and their neighbours to throw together some sort of counterattack that would deny Pan. In the end, I had no border with Pangaea. I wasn't even in ritual range of anything relevant as Pangaea. So I just had to accept that I couldn't control what was happening there. I had to, at most I could coordinate a little bit to make sure things were happening, but for the most part I couldn't do anything. And I had to focus on my immediate objectives, which is, assuming that Pangaea doesn't win the game here, how do I put myself in the best possible position? And what I did at this point was I started breaking up Conjuration with the idea that I was going to get to Conjuration 8 in order to access some elemental royalty, to get to 7 and get Wraith Lords along the way, with a view to maybe eventually going into the Tartarian business, although that's not the first priority I have. But I definitely want to break into Death Magic in a bigger way, in a mobile way, because my current Death Mage is the Giant of Ulm, the Demi-Lich, who ain't going nowhere, to get myself a little bit of magic diversity. I also decided that I need to keep the expansion train rolling. You need to be taking a few provinces at least. Sitting idle is not particularly valuable. I've done a couple of turns at this point. So I used this random assassin that I had in order to go around assassinating underwater commanders, which I'm then going to seize with a thug this coming turn. And I've also pinged and are prepping for an attack on this throne. I've grouped up a big army with mage support, and my plan is to roll this throne. Notice I snuck through and took Konberg. It's not currently connected to anything. I'm not getting any value from it. But when I take this throne, I will then hopefully be able to sweep all the way to Centania, maybe even to Miskia. I don't think I'll be able to save Silver Wall. I think Abyssia will get that. Femoria, being AI, might respond violently, but I'm hoping they will prioritize attacking and saving their fort over salvaging this province. And if they don't, I've got a big army coming in anyway. It's partly supplied, so it should be able to feed itself in this territory. That'll allow us to sweep through down south. The Helheim-Therodian War has gone back and forth. My current understanding is that Helheim has engaged in a bit of a counterattack over the last few turns, pushing Theridos back to their enclaves in this sort of area out here. Helheim, for the record, because it's been so long, encapsulates all of this territory down here. This is Calum. Now, the fact that this was Tir na Nog tells me that, as well as everything else, Calum is probably engaged in a surprise attack, or at least an attack of some sort, on TNN, which is causing them to basically collapse. And so I'm preparing to potentially go in and vulture on TNN, hopefully with their consent. But they don't seem like they're long for this world, because they were small to begin with, and Calum has come in like a wrecking ball to absolutely demolish them. But hopefully, more importantly, Calum's resources will be focused on Pangaea and be able to push them off their throne rush. That's turn 40. I'm going to jump forward a few turns, and we'll be able to see how Pangaea responded and how that impacted us. Well, that didn't take long, did it? This is turn 46, so I checked in 6 turns ago. And this is a good turn to close out this arc, because you'll remember 6 turns ago, Pangaea had rushed Calum, had secured this throne, and was in a position to win the game. If they had pushed on one more throne while holding what they had, they would have won the game. Cut to 6 turns later, and Calum is ascendant. Calum has shattered Pangaea. Calum are the proud owners of Calum itself, but also of Tianqi. Pangaea itself is under siege. The surroundings are all occupied. Doesn't seem like anyone else really accomplished a huge amount in terms of taking territory from Pangaea. Instead, it was Calum that demolished every single throne Pangaea held in rapid succession. And this terrifies me. Calum was already strong, but over the last 6 turns, Calum has occupied almost all of what was formerly one of the largest nations in the game. They've taken the absolute lion's share of land from Pangaea. They have also moved in and occupied a significant share of TNN. TNN is now basically has ceased to exist. Saramatia, who I have no problem with because they're a little bit more compact, and also because we got a good relationship. I've got a decent relationship with Calum, but they're now getting far too large. Saramatia is taking 1 TNN fort. Calum has secured all of TNN's other territory, including bumping with me a few times, as you can see in a few places, which has cost me a little bit, but more importantly meant that Calum, rather than I, get the territory. I've had some successes. I've been able to move down to Centania. I've forted the throne and secured it a little bit, so I've got this flank ready to go. But the clear and pressing is obviously Calum by this point in the game. This is turn 46, and Calum is obviously ascendant, and I keep a very close eye on them from now on. Meanwhile, over here, last time we checked in, Helheim was in the ascent. Cut to turn 46, and Therados has advanced so far and controlling so much of this that they've now cut off this northern exclave of Helheim, which is secured by fort, so it's still making income, which is nice and yummy in my territory. So I'm watching this, weighing up an intervention against Therados, a vulturing which secures me just this little bit of Helheim, knowing that he probably won't be able to come back at me, but I won't do that if it's going to cause any proper ill will, or whether I have to make a move or prepare to make a move on Calum, or whether I can risk getting a little bit more powerful first before I do so. Those are all questions that are going through my head. In terms of my economy, the growth hasn't been great the last couple of turns, but gem income has been good. The army has been tremendously rebuilt, and research is spiked. I'm now researching at 1,800 RP per turn, which is not superb for turn 46, but it's pretty decent. And I've broken into the conjuration level where last turn I summoned both a Wraith Lord and a King of Elemental Earth. And this turn we'll summon another King of Elemental Earth. And next turn I'll have enough gems to summon a second Wraith Lord, which will start breaking me into the game of having immortal thugs. Orm is good at making thug gear. This is more true of MA Orm than EA Orm, but it's still true in the early age. Orm is good at making thug gear, and it lacks good chassis to put that on. The Shame is just not a good chassis. It's a human HP, it's not great. A 33 HP high stat Immortal is a better deal for light gearing because it already comes with pretty good gear. And it's ethereal. So Wraith Lords are pretty good and will be a good vector for a little bit of weapon upgrading, a little bit of gear upgrading, and they'll be good to go. In particular, giving one of these flying shoes, and I can make flying shoes with a couple of my mages, will make them highly mobile immortal raiders, which will give me something which can compete with Calum's flying squads. Meanwhile, the Kings of Elemental Earth are something that can anchor an army. They can start casting the big buffs. So the plan now is to go up enchantment, go up to enchantment 7, which is good for a couple of things. I like mass flight, and I'm going to use Crystal Communions to get mass flight into my armies, because it's how you beat forts with someone like Orm, and it's how you end battles before people's battlefield wipes can destroy all your squishy human HP units. Human HP units are so vulnerable. They're more efficient than things like giants for fighting. So, particularly early on in the game. But as you get later and later and later, you need to stack more and more buffs on them to keep them relevant to make up for their inherent squishiness. And Mass Flight's one of the things that will help me. Earthblood Deepwell is a good one to get to if I can afford it. I can now cast it because I have the Kings of Elemental Earth. Gift of Health would be really good because it would provide a mechanism to make my tarts better. So if I go to Conjuration 9 and have the requisite items and can get Tartarians, Gift of Health is a mechanism by which I can convert them into reliable super combatants. So that'd be handy. Faster than having recuperation through almost any other means. Gift of Health is the preferable way to do it. So I'm making the run for Enchantment 7. There's advantages of going even further. Enchantment 8 would give Liches, who are even better death mages than Wraith Lords, and are cheaper, but they don't have the inherent gear and ethereality that makes them really good raiders and thugs. But I'll keep my mind open. My gem income is okay, it's not fantastic. And especially once I spend a lot of gems summoning another Wraith Lord and another Earth King, I'm going to be pretty tapped on a lot of my gems. So I'm going to wait. I'm not going to wait. I'm going to secure a little more. I'm going to secure a little more ground where I can, but there's not much room to maneuver, and I'm going to have to pick a target. I have a lot going on in my mind at this point. Attacking Saramatia makes no sense. They're not super strong. They're not a danger to win the game, but they're also not a pushover. Kalem would be the target if you want to knock down the game leader. Both Therados and Helheim continue to be dangerous. Helheim is a valuable vulturing opportunity if I think Therados will keep winning, but I don't want Therados to win too hard because then I'm the natural next target for Mr. Popkill in the lake over here. The fact that I have dived into the lake was... yeah, so this was attacked by Indies, and 2 turns, I think, before this, one of my provinces was taken by Indies, and Therados attacked it, and I complained to him, and he was like, nah, like, our deal didn't say you couldn't take ground that was held by Indies. And I was like, well, I'm going to knock you off it. He's like, yeah, you're welcome to do that. That's fine. That won't start a war. So I did that. And then his province was attacked by Indies, so I just jumped in, did this, and immediately sent in a message so about India attacks not being covered. And this also helps provide some assistance to Helheim, who are currently on the receiving end. So a little bump with Therados, not a problem as far as I'm concerned. Hinnom, interestingly, has liberated one last fort. We're not going back into Thodaz. Thodaz is an interesting province. Sorry, this is taking away from the strategic outline. But so this is a province with 1 gem, 2 gem, extra resources, 3 gems. 3 gems and extra resources, but it's got a Well of Pestilence and 0 supply, which means you starve unless you bring enough for your entire army. It's a 500 War Integrity fortification, and the Well of Pestilence gives diseases to people who are besieging it. It's barely worth it. It might even not be worth it to actually besiege. So when Thodaz can be Vanheim's problem. If he wants to get his Vanheers diseased besieging Thodaz, he is welcome to it. Other than that, we've established proper, ongoing diplomatic relationships with a couple of other nations, mostly focused on those that border Kalem, to make sure we have an understanding of what they're doing, how many thrones they have, are they making a rush to win the game, because birds can rush very, very quickly. I just hope they don't do it immediately, because I'm finally starting to break out some diversity. I'm getting death, I'm getting more earth, I'm going to have crystals, which gives me access to a lot more battlefield magic, and if I can boost up, I might even be able to get more elemental royalty out. At least that's the goal. So, that's turn 46. That's an arc. We've gone from turn 37 to turn 46, during which time Tianchi fell, Tina Nog fell, Pangaea almost won the game and then was completely freaking annihilated, and the war between Therados and Helheim oscillated wildly while Abyssia took Femoria. It wasn't a normal game, but it was a super interesting one. We'll pick up again around about this point next episode as we talk about how the game evolved from that point on. See you then.